It sucks. It's really that simple. Until you sink skill points into your weapon skill and slap a bunch of accuracy mods on your weapon, not to mention the reload mods that are absolutely necessary for heavy weapons and rifles, it's not gonna hit the broadside of a barn unless you indulge the game's very strange mechanic of having the crosshair tighten as you stand still longer. This kind of dynamic crosshair was a thing back then, just look at Rainbow Six, but in Rainbow Six, it was only wide when you were moving. The crosshair narrowed when you stopped moving. In Deus Ex, you have to stand still for the better part of 10 seconds to get the crosshair to finally narrow from its widest point. So if you're in combat and you need to move because you're being shot at, you have to choose. Do I move to a better location to get away from the enemy, but be unable to hit the enemy once I get there? Or do I just stand here soaking up bullets until my crosshair narrows enough for me to hit the guy? It's just clunky as hell, and it's only made worse by the fact that the weapons still have a cone of fire anyway. So even if you have master skill with a set of weapons, you still see shots miss the center of your crosshairs. If they wanted a cone of fire mechanic, they should have just drawn a circle in the middle of the screen. Have it get bigger when you move, contract quickly when you stand still, and have skill upgrades and accuracy mods narrow the cone. As it is, the crosshair is basically a trick. There is little guarantee your shots will actually land where your crosshair is pointing, and it feels very awkward to play. Not to mention, of course, that the AI is not really much fun to fight anyway. Their programming is extremely simple. They're going to do one of three things when they fight you. They're either going to stand in one place firing at you, they're going to fire at you while moving closer to you, or they're going to fire at you while side-strafing. They are dumb as posts and really easy to gun down because they do not possess any at all ability to try and preserve their own lives. Given that the Half-Life Marines existed at this point in time and put these guys to shame, I guess the saving grace is that the shooting mechanics are so bad that it makes it hard to properly hit these guys, so they pose much more of a threat than they otherwise should. Although that's not really a good thing. The AI can hear sounds, but only particular kinds. Throwing objects distracts them, as does the sound of you hitting the ground when falling from a height, or your footsteps if you get very close to them. But for the most part, they're deaf. Pretty blind, too. Their field of vision is very narrow, and it also operates apparently on a radius rather than line of sight. And that radius is pretty small. It's possible in a larger area to have a shootout with one enemy in full view of another, and the other enemy will not react because you're too far away from them to, and I use this term liberally, see you. So it's rather easy to sneak up on enemies if the level allows for it, which it doesn't always. Many of Deus Ex's levels are not as open as you might think from hearing that the game has rather extensive levels, which it does not always have. Many of them are quite linear, and unless you played the game before, doing a proper stealth run and mostly avoiding combat is impossible in some parts because some levels simply don't have many side paths for you to take. Or you simply won't know where the enemies are positioned or what their patrol patterns are, and you're likely to just stumble upon them and start a fight. The HUD's a bit weird. It has a compass for some reason instead of a minimap. And the game goes out of its way to give you cardinal directions at points. But the levels are not open enough for these directions to actually be useful. And in the very, very few places where they just might be useful, like perhaps the Champs-Élysées, you don't get any. Great. I still, by the way, have no idea what the purpose of the log system is. It's like an RPG log, except that combat is excluded. It only logs item usage and skill points. And since you can check your health at any time anyway, and it's a first-person shooter, not a, roll the dice D&D game, this whole log system is pointless even if it did log damage. I have no idea why it exists. The Images tab is mostly useless. There's a few maps in the game that are helpful, but most images you're given are completely pointless. They're a waste of time. Now, the conversations screen is a welcome addition. It allows you to go back and revisit previous chats you've had if you need to remember a plot point or something. Same with the notes menu. Though, oddly, the notes can only be gotten from data cubes, which are a hilariously archaic, futuristic device that only makes sense from a time before smartphones were invented. Emails and news cannot be added to the notes. You would have to look at it, write it down on a piece of paper, then go into the notes menu and type it in manually, which is really annoying if an email gives you a code or a password of some kind.